Excellent. Now, we're going to be doing a little double act, Hanne and I. I'm going to talk first for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Hanne afterwards. We're going to be talking about abandoning the hamster wheel and finding trust. Because imagine that you wake up one morning and you realize that for your entire life, you've done everything absolutely perfectly. Everything you've done absolutely 100%. And then you realize that you've done all the wrong things. That'd be pretty annoying, wouldn't it? And, you know, when you're at a conference like this, and I'm listening to Mark Mullen yesterday, for instance, talking about First Direct, where he's saying that because they are so far away from their customers, they don't get tempted to sell something that the customers don't want. That kind of makes you think, what is it that we actually want to do with all the customer experience that this whole conference is about? So what I'm about to tell you is what went before, what Hanne's going to tell you about afterwards. So I'm going to talk about some of the things, some of the inspirations that we got before embarking on that journey. So there's a lot of things that aren't really about mobile, because I'm convinced that if you want to really challenge and break new ground, you shouldn't really be looking at your own industry. You need to look at how things are done completely differently in other industries. So this is about Call Me's journey. But I'm just going to start with a little story from my home country, Denmark. This is our local supermarket. And this little story is about the cost of being indifferent. My wife is an avid food blogger, and she loves to talk about food. So she's the one who drives the food decisions in our household. And this is our local supermarket. And it's probably totally unpronounceable to all of you, but it's called Superbrugsen. And it's a fairly small supermarket, this one, but it's a chain that's part of the Danish Co-op chain, which is the largest supermarket chain in Denmark. And one day, in October 2011, so that's about a year and a half ago, my wife was down shopping, as she is about twice a week, and she forgot the change, which I guess, you know, it probably happens to a lot of us, that we do the shopping, we get through, there's a lot of pressure from people behind you, and you get home and you realize you haven't got the change. Or in Denmark, sometimes you ask for maybe 10 or 15 pounds extra on your credit card, so you have some cash. But she forgot it, so she said, well, you know, left the bags for the rest of the family to unpack, and then went down to the supermarket and said, you know, explained how things were, because she was a regular customer. It should be fairly easy for them to understand and maybe just give her the cash. But the young lady that that took care of her in the magazine counter, which doubled in this small supermarket as customer services, said that she couldn't really help her because she was not allowed to do that, and that would she come back after closing hours, and then they would count the cash tills and see if there was too much money in it. So my wife comes back about 5 minutes later, and she's infuriated, because what just happened there was that she's been a customer for such a long time, and they didn't believe her. And it was just about 10, it's the equivalent of about 10 quid that she didn't get. So what it really shows is that she was getting into a really emotional state. And it was about something that had nothing to do with the product. It had nothing to do really with the service, but it had to do with the culture. That the person taking that request didn't have the authority, wasn't empowered to do anything about it, wasn't allowed to do the right thing. So what I did was, I thought, at that time I had just gone through the certification for Net Promoter, and I thought, wow, that's a great little case study. So I decided, and actually a few months before, I had co-founded a small web service called Spear, which is essentially the Danish word for quid, which is the Danish equivalent to mint.com, you know, where you can kind of track your spending and find out how much money you're using. So what I decided to do was to see, you know, how does that actually work? So I had been given permission afterwards by my wife to talk about this story, but I actually decided just to track and see how things were going. So what I did, this is Spear. This is where you essentially go in and you find out how much money you're spending. And to my great surprise, we were actually spending about £6,500 a year in this particular supermarket. Now, my excuse is that we're a large family, so that's okay. But that's a lot of money. So that's like £550 a month that we were spending in this supermarket. And that has been going on for the last 10 years. So that's a lot of money. And so she really should be a known face down in that supermarket. And yet, they chose not to believe her. They chose not to recognize her. So what I did was, this was in October 2011, I decided to look at what actually happened the rest of that month. And the spending was down to £322. I've converted that to pounds. In November, down to 227. In December, down to 59. And actually, the total difference of those 3 months was actually over £1,000 less that we were spending in that supermarket. And when I checked some months back to see what was it over a 12-month period, we're talking about over £3,000 less that we had spent in this particular supermarket of one customer. So if you know about Net Promoter, you also know that Net Promoters in a company, they spend more. They recommend to their friends. And detractors, they prevent customers from being customers. And if you take all these things into consideration, and you assume that my wife was probably not the only one who had that experience, we're probably talking about a small supermarket with maybe 40, 50 employees having a loss every year of about £200,000. And multiply that by a number of years, and this fairly small supermarket has a significant problem. And that's over little things like not recognizing the customers and not having that human touch, which we've heard about so many times earlier on today. And I think that's really because if you look at supermarkets, they think that the way they should tempt the customers and they create relationships with the customers is to tempt them to buy more. I mean, this is the checkout aisle in any supermarket that probably is in the UK as well. You're queuing up down the aisle, and the queue is probably too long because they're understaffing. And while you're standing there, they feel that the best way of getting added sales is to tempt you to buy extra stuff. Rather than trying to get the stuff ready, trying to empower people to do the right thing. Now, as an example, battery eggs. How many of you in here would say that you're concerned that 60% of all eggs sold in this country come from these hens? Yeah? Now, if I'd ask the question, how many, actually every time you buy eggs, would buy organic eggs? I'm not going to ask. The answer is probably somewhat different. And I think it's also about taking a stance, because consumers no longer accept that things are just a black box, that they do things behind the curtains and then they do something else in front of the customer. They want to know. People want to be informed. And things like just selling eggs from caged hens is increasingly not becoming acceptable to a large amount of consumers, because they want to know about these things. They want to make decisions based on being informed about things and morality and ethics. This is a campaign that was run in Sweden by the Swedish co-op. And I think at one point it went viral, but essentially what it says is that we've stopped selling eggs from caged hens. Get into this shopping trolley and then you'll see why. And that is about taking a stance. That is about showing that they care. And that, and actually what they did, they took a whole product line out, which was very significant in revenues, and said, we're not going to sell this because we will set ourselves strategic limitations in order to better the world, in order to, for animal welfare, because we know it matters to people. And there are a lot of people who are a lot of companies who are very scared of making decisions like that, of actually setting strategic limitations and saying, we're not going to do this because it's the right thing to do because we're going to lose money. Now, it just so happens that co-op Konsum in Sweden, they found that after they completely abolished all eggs from caged hens, actually the total number of eggs being sold increased at a higher price. And there was a survey that was done by YouGov in Denmark recently that said 67% said they would view the supermarket more favorably if they stopped selling eggs from caged hens. Meanwhile, only 3% said they would drop their supermarket if they stopped selling eggs from caged hens. So I think sometimes, and that's really where I get into a lot of discussions with management from various companies about whether they can do this or not. What is it going to mean? And there's a lot of management being afraid that they're going to lose out, that this is going to mean something negative to their business. And I think what most of them actually realize is that companies these days, they're like a glass house. You cannot do something and have a culture on the inside and do something completely else on the outside. You cannot tell the environment and have and all your customers that you're being responsible and that your values are about being responsible, socially responsible, etc., and then you're doing something completely different on the inside. Because we do live in glass houses, and it's because of social media. So everybody in a company is potentially a whistleblower. And we've seen it over and over again, that companies do not get away with simply saying something on the outside and doing something else on the inside. You need to live the values that you're trying to portray on the outside. I think part of the problem is that, and I think it's been mentioned a number of times today, is that there has been a paradigm that the purpose of a company is to return a profit. Now, my conviction is that a profit is great, but it's a result of doing the right things. And I've spent a great deal of my career trying to find out what is it that you actually do to do the right things to turn a profit, so that a profit is just a result of doing the right things. And certainly, it's been mentioned a great number of times today, is that being able to enchant your customers, to amaze them, and to do something that surprises them, give them a customer experience, is part of it. I mean, that's fairly logic. It's fairly logic that if you have raving fans, rather than just customers who buy there because they have to or because there is no other alternative, they're more likely to be promoters. They're more likely to be the ones that are going to stay longer, they're going to spend more, they're going to recommend your company. But the problem is, if you're measuring other things and you're not having the kind of culture and the kind of employees in your company, it's not going to work. So engaged employees is a paramount importance here. And one of the studies I conducted recently actually came to the conclusion that over 71% of the companies in a particular sector had mainly disengaged employees. I mean, how are you going to enchant customers if most of your employees are disengaged? It's just not going to work. And one of the companies that we looked at Call Me before we embarked on this journey that Hanne's going to talk about was Zappos. And how many of you know of Zappos? I mean, it's a great story. And one of the most fantastic things they do is that they make their values livable and actually live. So these are the first 4 ones. The first one, deliver wow through service. Now, rather than just having things like, you probably come into companies, and maybe some of your companies have as well, your values as just one word on a poster, or maybe it's printed on a mug. It says something like visionary or brave. But what does it actually mean? I'm convinced that values, they have to be very, very actionable. You need, as an employee, to be able to get in the morning and meet your co-workers, sit down, and then you need to be able to translate in every single thing you do, your actions and your values into your actions. Otherwise, it doesn't work. If you take Zappos, they have obviously deliver wow through service. I'm going to come back with a little example. But the other one, number 3, create fun and a little weirdness. Now, why do you need to be weird? Now, when you apply for a job at Zappos, they ask you things like, on a scale from 0 to 10, how weird are you? And why do they ask that question? Well, because in order to have that innovation in everything you do, and in order to be able to enchant customers on an ongoing basis and all the time, you need to be a little weird. Now, maybe that doesn't go for all companies, but you need somebody who has the imagination and the creativity to be able to do that. And another question they ask is, on a scale from 0 to 10, how lucky are you? Now, why would they ask a question like that? How lucky are you? They do that because, as it turns out, people who consider themselves to be lucky obviously are not cosmically luckier than other people. They're not more likely to win the big lottery. But if you consider yourself to be lucky, and there's actually an Englishman called Richard Wiseman who is actually an expert in luck. And he's been conducting studies that say that people who consider themselves to be lucky, if they walk down a corridor, and he's been conducting some experiments, and he put a £5 note on the floor, and they walk from one room to another, they are more than 3 times more likely to find that banknote, simply because they have more lateral thinking. They are more open to things. They don't just look at things that way. So considering yourself to be lucky and weird is actually a positive thing in Zappos, and that was one of the main points of inspiration that we looked at. Actually, I'm going to show you a little video, because at Zappos, as in most other companies, they record the customer service calls. And what they've done is they've turned some of them into commercials, asked permission from the customers, and they're a bit like a little Muppet show. So it's a 30-second little video. Oops.
Received the most beautiful dress this morning. Oh, awesome. Oh, it's gorgeous. My problem is I don't know who it's from.
Can I take a look here?
Okay. Does this happen a lot?
No, not really. Who do you think it's from?
Is it from Eddie?
No.
Okay. Daryl? He's
No.
like stalking me. Okay. Is it from Jesse?
Yeah.
Ah! Rachel, it's from Jesse!
Oh my God.
She's so hot.
Now I think that's a great customer service call, because, I mean, what exactly happened there? Why did he need to be weird in what he did? I mean, when was the turning point in that conversation? Anyone? I think the turning point was the time when he started a small guessing competition. So rather than just answer the question, he would say, who do you think it's from? And then, obviously, you could just imagine, when she was going through and guessing who it was. And in the end, it was the one that she hoped. And she was, enjoying that a lot together with her friend. And I think those are the kind of little human touches that need to happen every single day. Because essentially, a company is made up as a mosaic of all the little actions and all the little decisions that every single employee takes every single day. So it's not about the broad brush strategy that maybe a consultancy or the board comes out with. The fabric of a company is made of all the little things, all the little decisions that are being made by employees, and the decisions being made every single day. And if we don't empower our employees, how can we expect them to do that? How can we expect them to do all these little surprising, these little enchanting things for their customers, and things that will actually go viral and people will start to talk about? So that's really where I think purpose comes in. If we have the culture right, we're also able to move to the next stage. And I think purpose is really what should perpetuate every single aspect of a business. It's a powerful motivator, obviously, for employees. If they know that what we're doing here is not just making money to the owners. We're not just about shareholder value. We're about making a difference. Can you imagine working for Konsum Co-op in Sweden and being part of that during that campaign, where everybody was talking about it, everybody was being forced to have an opinion about this. And I can tell you, the employee engagement was enormous. It was close to the absolute maximum that the company had ever had, because they did something that made a difference and made them proud. And that's what creates emotional bonds, not only with employees, but also emotional bonds with customers. And it's the sort of thing that, as Anthony Thompson from Metrobank said, sometimes you don't really know exactly what the value is, and you can't really make a business case of it, but you have a gut feeling that it's the right thing to do. And then, interestingly, if you look at this chain, if you follow that chain and you build it on purpose, you will get the rest, and you will end up with profits. And that is evidence-based. But it's the sort of thing that when I talk to management teams over and over again, it's the only thing they're interested in. But I'm telling you, what most employees and customers are interested in is that you have a purpose. Now, I'm just going to end up with another little interesting organization. It's called TED. How many of you have seen a TED Talk? Now, TED is an organization based on voluntary employees. And I do some voluntary work at TEDx Copenhagen. So X stands for the independent. So it takes place, there's a TEDx London as well. And I have probably never been part of an organization that was more engaged than the TED organization, because everybody believes in spreading ideas, because that's what TED is about. And I'm just thinking, can we build on all the power of a voluntary organizations in organizations that are not based on voluntary work? I mean, what are the things that motivate people? And in voluntary organizations, it's the fact that they believe in the same thing. They have a common idea of doing something, making a difference. And that's what makes them, a lot of these people, and these are some of the volunteers for TEDx Copenhagen in 2012, to actually work maybe 100, 200, 300 hours for nothing, other than the satisfaction of making a difference. I'm going to end up here with Klaus Meyer, and just so incidentally here, the second time today that Noma is getting mentioned. He was one of the speakers at TEDx Copenhagen 2012. Klaus Meyer, he's a food entrepreneur, and he's the co-founder of Noma. And the reason why I want to mention him is the fact that he started his passion, and that wasn't just about Noma, which started about 10 years ago. He started a bit earlier than that. He was an apprentice in France, and there was a baker called Guy. And Guy had said to him that it's only in the light of eternity that you see the true value of your priorities and decisions. So sometimes you really need to look to wear the long goggles or the binoculars, because otherwise you don't really see the true value of it. And I think if there's one thing that I think that we learned also in the Call Me case, is that you need to do that. You need to look longer term. And then perhaps, rather than just being a company that focuses on bigger, faster, cheaper, and maybe nastier, we can move to wiser, better, smarter, and tougher. So thank you very much, and I'll pass the word on to Hanne.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, and I hope you still have a little energy left here to listen to my story, because I'm really here to inspire you. I'm here to inspire you to take on your leadership roles and go out there and make some really positive impact on society. Denmark is a fairy tale country, as you know. We have the great H.C. Andersen, or we had many years among us, and this is actually also has become a fairy tale for me. It is a journey that has gone beyond my wildest dreams. And I would like to share with you first a little movie that we have made, because the movement we've started, we're actually also going to Cannes here in June, to the big festival down there with the case. So therefore I'm fortunate to have a case in English so I can share it with you. And that will also show the results of the way we have taken. And then later, I will tell you some of the thoughts we had before we actually went this way, and also the initiatives we used to drive the movement.
Fucking idiot. Bitch. Asshole. What has happened to us? A new survey shows that 77% of the Danish population feels that the tone of public discourse has become too aggressive. The small mobile company Call Me, with a 3% market share, decided to change it. How? By starting a nationwide debate. Is verbal abuse spreading like a disease? The Watch Your Mouth campaign is launched and generates a nationwide media storm. The debate about verbal abuse versus courtesy exploded on social media. It culminates in a massive movement when thousands of people take the online pledge. Students create more than 100 films about the subject, Watch Your Mouth. The Ministry of Education wants to use the campaign in exams. The campaign inspires national television stations to pick up the subject. Watch Your Mouth at Work is launched. The debate reaches all corners of Denmark. Behind this powerful movement is a purpose-driven strategy and culture and a dedicated CEO. But there's more. The movement brought the small company significant results. The PR value is more than 15 million Danish kroner. Buying preference increased by 260%. Customer loyalty increased by 24%. Recommendation rate doubled. Facebook fans increased by 500%. Employee loyalty higher than ever. So watch your mouth. It pays off.
So how did we ever end up going that way? I've actually worked in the mobile industry for 11 years, and to tell you the truth, I was tired of it. It is, for many customers, I think, the way they see us, it's a rotten industry. We spend a lot of money advertising product and price. We take a lot of bad profits. So generally, at least in Denmark, and I think it's the same here, the image is really, really bad. So I was really yearning to find another way forward. And I'm a small fighting brand in the big Telia Sonera group, where we have a mother brand called Telia in Denmark, and I have a lot of limitations upon me. So what we actually did was we found an innovative way to move forward, to redefine ourselves. And what we came up with 2 years ago was a very strong trust strategy that built on 3 very strong pillars. It was looking at our culture, being very strong on culture. It was making some very strong trust principles. That's actually also some strategic limitations, as I'll come to later. And then also finding a way to create a lot of positive impact. The beliefs that guided us was, as Ole also has said, that you can see through the world now, we have no control whatsoever. But one thing we do know is that word of mouth is the only thing that will ensure our survival in the business in the long term. So we really went for word of mouth, and we also went for what we will call alternative marketing, because we do not really believe in traditional marketing anymore. Sure, it still works, but we believe more in alternative marketing, which is initiatives through which we engage people in making positive impact. What we also believe is that we are changing values. We believe there's a new paradigm among us, and there's actually a new book coming out soon that's called The Athena Doctrine. You can see a TED Talk on it. It's a very interesting book where they have interviewed 64,000 people around the world. And that shows that our values are changing, and they are changing rapidly. We are going from the very masculine values to the feminine values, and that's going to influence the way we live our lives, the way we buy product, and therefore it is also going to influence the way we lead the companies where we work. Another thing is meaning. I don't know for you guys, but I have an increasingly urge for meaning as I get older. I need to find a meaning in the work that I do every day, and the meaning dimension has exploded for me since we started working in a purpose-driven way. We also believe that as managers in companies, be that small ones, as Call Me, because we are a very small company, but certainly also in big companies, we are co-creators of tomorrow. Tomorrow is just a dream right now. Tomorrow doesn't exist, hasn't arrived yet. So the decisions we take and the actions we implement has a profound impact on the society that we live in. And we can together create waves. So what we set out to do at the time was trying to define our DNA. We really had to redefine ourselves because we had lost our purpose. So we thought about it, and we came back to communication among people. We are the only species that uses words. And I don't know how it is here in England, but at least in Denmark, I think we have lost our virtues. We have gone from being a society that has a very big value freedom to having a very big value emptiness. And you can see that in our kids and in the way that we treat each other. And it's especially predominant in the public sphere in Denmark, where people are being extremely rude towards foreigners. Not foreigners from other countries but just among ourselves also. But as a foreigner in Denmark, actually, you really notice this, because this is quite different from a lot of other countries. And the short movie you saw in the beginning started with the movie with which we launched this movement, because what we have actually done is that we have held a mirror up for the Danes to see and to make them reflect. But what we also reflected on was, what can we actually live out on a daily basis? Because we thought in order to be purpose-driven, it has to be something that we can live both in our brain but also in our hearts. And we decided that to focus on communication on people would be the right thing for us. And we also focused, in order to go this way, on our culture. And in order to focus on our culture, we made a new narrative. We had to make a narrative that explained what kind of company is it that we are. And in that reflection, we came up with a new narrative where we had 3 focus areas. And we said focus area number 1 above everything else in our company is our employees, because without those, we cannot provide the service for our customers that they deserve. And we cannot live out our dreams. So the golden rule is around which everything is centered culture-wise in Call Me, and also when it comes to serving our customer. And that is also because we believe in building a very strong social capital. And in order to build a very strong social capital, you need trust, and you need fairness, and you need respect. And that's everything that's embedded in the golden rule. And then we made a dream. We do not use vision, mission, whatever anymore. We only have this narrative to guide us. And this is the dream we actually wrote down at the time, that we dream of being co-creators of a better world. And to tell you the truth, some of my employees thought I was going a little bit the hippie way. I mean, this is not standard CEO stuff. And my own boss was also, Hanne, where are you going with this? I mean, you want to save the world? And I was like, well, actually, yeah, that's kind of what I dream about. I mean, in my own little way. But we were also taking upon us a journey where big data couldn't help us. I couldn't guarantee, neither him nor my employees, that we would succeed with doing this. This was high risk, both of creating something very powerful, but also of failing. There was no recipe, but we thought that it would take us somewhere. I felt that it would take us somewhere, and we embarked upon it. And together with the employees, we defined our culture. We were lucky. We had a very strong culture, but we had never defined it. Together with the employees, we actually set up 5 ways of working in Call Me, and we have explained those with a lot of words, which I'll not bore you with here, but those are very important, that it is not just words or one-liners. It is actually descriptions of the way we work that also guide new employees who come to us. Of course, they receive very good training, but I think it's very important that you also describe with words how it is that you're living out these rules. in order to constantly be able to reinforce them. We also made a culture book. Several others have showed that too, but we did that, and we were inspired by Zappos, who make it every year, but we are not making it every year because our budget doesn't allow us that. So instead, we made it superb. We took these great pictures and did a lot of other fun stuff in connection with the book, so it really became this memorable Bible for us. And we actually also put it online for everybody to see. We also made some trust principles, and actually in connection with launching the trust strategy, it only took the employees a couple of days before they came up with a term called antitrust. And they started talking about antitrust, and they found a lot of stuff that we were doing that was antitrust. And what we had promised from the management group was that we would embark upon this journey, and we would remove everything that didn't give trust. And that's what we have continuously been doing now for the last couple of years. And the mobile industry in Denmark is all about price and product. That's primarily what the companies spend all the marketing money on, and we are the dominant industry when it comes to marketing spend. But we have consistently, in the last 2 years, not been running campaigns to new customers where we would not favorize existing customers also. So I'm actually really proud of that. Also, when you call me, we do not have products in the drawer that you get, so we don't reward you for disloyalty, which is also a very embedded technique in our industry. So what we actually did was we set out to find our way about how to go to market with this, and this was actually really, really difficult. If I had followed the advice of our advertising agency, this would have been a normal campaign. But we didn't do that. We did focus interviews, and we listened, and then we went back to basics, and we did that several times. It was really, really hard, but also it was really learning to find how to take this to market. And as I said before, there was no recipe. Along the way, we started dreaming bigger and bigger, and we actually started dreaming about creating a culture, obtaining some kind of cultural impact with this. Because we said, we have to change attitudes in Denmark. And in order to change people's attitudes towards something, you have to be able to obtain cultural impact. But how do you do that? I mean, you don't do that with a normal advertising campaign. So finally, we ended up defining our role as a company who would inspire and make people reflect about this subject. And that is actually an extremely important part of the journey we've been on, because that is what we have held on to since we set out to do this. And we have been drawn in all kinds of different directions, but we have held on to this part. And from the beginning, we said that it was a campaign, but as I told you, from the beginning we dreamt of making a wave, and that is actually what it has turned into. It has become so much bigger than we ever imagined. Today we work with schools across the country who are all using our TV spots, who are very serious and very intellectual spots, and who are actually being performed by Call Me employees. And the little boy you'll see in the spot I will finish my speak with is actually my own little son. But we do work a lot with the schools, and what we do is we offer them, among other stuff, a workshop where they make new Speak Nice movies. And it is tremendous success, and we're already booked for the rest of the year, and I'm actually considering hiring more people to go out and do this for us. Another thing we do is that we work closely with work sites. We have 2 Facebook pages that focuses on the movement, and we work in different ways with work sites, and have just actually lately here been contacted by one of the big municipalities, kommune, municipalities in Denmark that would like to work with us because they would like to work with creating a higher degree of empathy and respect among the people living there. And here we're talking both schools but also work sites. So for us as a company, we have created this property that we're working with, and that goes way beyond price. So our strategy on price is that we are followers. We are not being innovative there. We're being innovative in an arena where none of our competitors are being innovative right now. And what it has done for us is that it has made us increasingly being perceived as a very innovative company. And it is encouraging, you could say, and inspiring our employees to be innovative in all the other areas of the company. So being purpose-driven is a business logic that makes sense for more than the bottom line. Every time in Denmark, when I go out and talk about this, people seriously doubt our motive. And that's whether old or young. People are still in this industrial paradigm where profit is the holy grail. And that's why I'm here to tell you this, is that going this way and doing it the right way will improve your bottom line. And it will also bring a lot more meaning to your everyday work life. And I'd like to finish with showing you the second movie that we launched, and for which, or that's for the movie in general, we have won 5 awards in Denmark. And to tell you the truth, being a small company with not a lot of money, winning awards was never on the agenda. So this has really created a lot of pride, a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of joy in Call Me. Thank you.